Y'all think too small, I got big dreams. You just starting, I'm way ahead at the end scenes. Started reading and dodging all of the quick schemes. Money like your Spotify, boy, I got 10 streams. Be real big, I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids.
Hi, I'm Sara.
And I'm Daniel.
And this is episode 14 of the Dealmakers podcast. And today we are with Todd Steinberg. Todd of Thrive Financial Group is a broker that specializes in accounting practice, sales, and has been doing that for what he claims is over 30 years, which is a lot of years for the age that you are, Todd. So welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm 75 years old. So yeah, I've been doing this since I was 45. No, I am. It is crazy to think it's been that long, but the truth of the matter is I was 16, believe it or not, when I started in the accounting consulting industry. As fate would have it, my next door neighbor was the founder of a consulting firm that specialized in helping accounting firms grow. And at the time, I just was a kid looking for a summer job, and our office was around the corner. So I actually would ride my bike to work. Didn't know what the business was, but I started as the kind of guinea pig, putting brochures together, making copies. Next thing you know, I'm going to school for business and marketing. And make a long story short, I spent the next 25 years at that organization, kind of from the outhouse to the penthouse, if you will. Became the vice president of sales. And essentially what we did was we trained accounting firms. Imagine this, teaching accountants how to sell. That was our mission. So we had our work cut out for us. And I mean that with all due respect. It was a great run. We would pack a room full of accountants every month with about 30 CPAs, EAs, tax professionals from all over the country. And it was like sales and marketing for dummies. Like, this is what you say. This is what you don't say. This is how you go out and bring in business clients. What I didn't realize at the time, which has ultimately led me to my career today at Thrive Financial Group, is many of the clients that I was helping them build their accounting practices. Fast forward a couple decades later, now they're ready to retire, relocate, get involved in other business interests. So I found myself in a very natural position to bring buyers and sellers together. So while I no longer am a marketing consultant, that ship has sailed. Thrive Financial Group for the last 5 years has specialized exclusively in working with accountants to help them buy and sell practices across the country, primarily 500,000 to 5 million in revenue. So that's the experience that I bring to the table. During those 25 years at the other firm, I should indicate that I started selling accounting firms since 1999. So I wasn't quite 30 years or 16 when I started doing that, but I was only about 21. So, that's still pretty good in my book. So
I prefer to imagine you as a 16-year-old, like going door to door and trying to sell an accounting practice. You've got like Girl Scout cookies, a wrapping paper, and a P&L.
So with our focus on acquisitions, I mean, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about business brokering and selling. But so before we get into all that, I wanted to spend a little time on the consulting that you did for so long. The industry has changed so much over the last 2 or 3 decades. So, I mean, it's just amazing to me. You've seen so many different iterations of how you sell and market accounting services, how you package accounting services. And I remember from our first call, you guys were the ones that kind of pioneered the monthly reoccurring revenue model. Is that right?
yeah, it was a little before our time. It was kind of value billing before that was a term. So what we had created was, and this was being taught to accountants all the way back to 1991, where we had a package of services that was designed for small business owners. So there's about 16 items on there in that agreement that for a fixed monthly fee, and this was before the days of ACH and direct draft, so we would actually go pick up a check from the client, but every month for the maintenance of that accounting system, they would pay us a monthly fee. And that accounting, bookkeeping, write-up is what we would call it, was really the main focus. So it was small to medium-sized business owners, anywhere from startup companies to maybe 20 employees, those that would outsource their accounting controls to a firm, a small to mid-size accounting firm with maybe 1 to 19 employees, we were extremely successful in teaching accountants how to generate those leads. This was back when like appointment setting, doing telemarketing before the internet and pay-per-click and social media and digital advertising was even a thing. So yeah, I have seen a lot of iterations and changes, but one thing that's been consistent throughout the years is that small to mid-sized firms still value today, as much as they did 30 years ago, having a good book of recurring monthly business clients. It opens up the door to sell other additional services today, whether that's advisory, whether that's wealth management, whether that's payroll. Obviously, income tax preparation is something that if you've got them as a monthly client, chances are you're doing their business return and their personal tax return. So yeah, I mean, the core concept of like why people need it and some of the sales processes still work today. How people generate leads and ultimately how they're being serviced, of course, that's changed dramatically.
I'm so glad that we're having you, that we have you on as a guest. I'm so glad we're talking about this now because this is an area that I underserve people. I own an accounting firm, got into business brokering late last year, so just a minute ago. And so many people come to me because they are looking to buy firms. Like Sara was saying, everyone wants an off-market accounting firm. But I come from virtual firms, like just from basically from the get-go. So I just I never realized, I have to like train my mind to realize and understand that there are firms out there that aren't packaged this way. They aren't selling services in this way. And that's a major opportunity for somebody looking to acquire. You can buy a firm like this, you can overhaul it, have a really valuable acquisition on your hands. So great call out on how, and I'm assuming you still see this today, that firms are still, not taking advantage of these lessons that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, even the traditional brick and mortar serving clients, acquiring that way, things really, even 10, 15 years ago when portals and cloud and things really became prevalent, that really went on at warp speed when COVID hit. So even traditional firms now that have clients that are 5 minutes down the road that they would visit them a few years ago, where the clients would come into the office. In many cases now, who wants to go deal with traffic and rain and snow when you can just jump on a Zoom meeting or communicate in a web portal or via email as necessary. So it shifted. I mean, even a lot of the sellers that I'm talking to that are sort of old school, that built a traditional CPA firm the old-fashioned way, in the last few years, they've adopted, and their clients have adopted, to be able to work with them in a more technology-forward way. There are certainly virtual firms that were designed and built from the ground up that way, but I'm finding that many of the firms that I'm talking with, small to mid-sized firms that are looking to retire, relocate, or sell for various reasons, while many of them still have a physical office presence, I asked them, well, does your staff come in? Not really. Do clients ever come in? No, not really. Do you really need the office? Probably not. So there's maybe a few older clients that still like to come in and sit down and talk about their, personal problems with the accountant as they get their taxes done, but those are few and far between anymore. So I'd say most of the practices that I'm talking with are definitely changed with the times.
I had a call yesterday with somebody who their whole business model is pulling in or acquiring at like 0.5x these poorly run practices that are all, in person, and there's they have, QuickBooks desktop and, pulls them in, grabs them at a really discounted rate, and then makes it all, systematized over the course of 2 years, and then sells it for like 1.5x. And that's their whole business, just turning around.
A couple of years ago, I had a listing. It was a great practice, profitable, good client mix, sellers available for a transition, all the things that a buyer would want. Problem was, they were in Bluefield, West Virginia. Now, I dare you to even try to find that on the map. I mean, it's a really small town, and it required a physical presence. Somebody had to be there. This was like 2017, 2018, pre-COVID. We had a really hard time. In fact, we were unable to locate a buyer for that practice, despite the fact that it had a lot of positives. Fast forward to last year, I have a client in somewhere in Arkansas. I mean, it was extremely rural. I was like, oh, I have another blue field on my hands here. But this practice was 100% virtual, even though the accountant sat in Arkansas. The clients were all over the place. And when we marketed this thing as a virtual firm, it was unbelievable. I mean, we had offers coming in from all over the country. It was a hot commodity, and we were able to sell that practice for a premium price, all because of their business model. They were just as profitable as any other firm. Client mix, nothing special, but it was virtual. So there was just a ton of interest. And if anyone's listening to this and they're thinking about how they can set up their practice, certainly you're opening up your business to the masses if you're able to do something like that and make those changes.
So there's something I want to go back to real quick, but first, if this is the first time you've seen Dealmakers podcast, if this sounds valuable to you, go ahead and subscribe. Drop in the comments if you have any questions that we can address on a follow up. But something I want to make sure we go back on. So Sara, you mentioned 0.5x, Todd, 1x. What are we talking about there for new listeners that maybe don't know how accounting firms are valued?
I generally see firms trading for somewhere between 1x to 1.5x. 1.5 is rare. Somewhere in the middle is more typical, 1.2, 1.25.
And that's a multiple of gross revenue.
Of revenue or sales, not EBITDA, not SDE. We could have a whole other podcast about why firms are valued that way versus other businesses, but this is the way it's been since I was a little 16-year-old riding my bike to work. So that has not changed. There are typically, when I look to value a practice and doing a valuation, there's typically 4 main factors that are drivers to valuations. Those are, and these are in no particular order: location, client mix, profitability, and transition assistance from the seller. And I would also lump in staff with transition assistance, who's going to be staying on to help this feel more like a merger than an acquisition. So when all those things are taken in consideration, you're usually going to end up somewhere in that 1 to 1.5 range, with most falling around 1.25.
Let me give you an example and ask a question here, just so, one, because I need the answer to this question, but 2, so that our listeners can get some more value from this, maybe even conceptualize this a little bit better. I had a initial seller interview with a firm I'm looking at yesterday. Top line sales is just shy of 4 million. Top line sales is, just shy of 4 million. Asking price is 4.8. SDE is 600. So we were at it was 1.5x gross, give or take, something like that, but 6.5 times SDE, which is just crazy compared to other industries that aren't valued based on top line. So do you ever consider a multiple of SDE, or is it always a percentage of top line sales?
Profitability is a factor, there's no question. But I'll give an example to illustrate why that's not the end all be all. I could have, let's just use your example of a $4 million firm, right? Maybe I have 2 firms. One of them is 600. What did you say that the SDE was? Was it 600?
About 600.
600,000? Okay. And let's say we have one $4 million firm that's got SDE of 600,000. We have another firm that's also generating 4 million that has SDE of, let's say, 1.2 million, twice that. The first practice that has SDE of 600,000, that owner or partner or partners potentially at that size, they like to take a lot of time off. Maybe they take 9 weeks vacation per year. Maybe their billable hours are 1,000 hours a year. Maybe they have Class A office space. Maybe they have a really talented staff that they slightly overpay because they're good and they've been with the firm for years. Over here on the other side, you have a $4 million practice, hire SDE at 1.2 million, but Class C office space. The owners are doing a lot of the work. You've got a staff that's got a lot of turnover. Maybe they don't use the latest and greatest tech stack like the other firm does, and they pay to play with the best software in the industry. My point here is beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. Which practice is more valuable? I mean, one might look at the first practice A and think that's the better route. One might look at practice B and think that's the better route. So I don't like to look at SDE until I really understand the dynamics of the practice in greater detail before I'm willing to say this is a better practice than that.
You must have seen a few of these over the last 30 years because you hit the nail on the head with practice A. You perfectly described it. So thank you.
Oh, really? Okay. Nice work, Todd. He's like, yeah, I know that exact one. Probably no. It seems like there's only so many. That's interesting because the SDE multiple, that's a low SDE, it seems like, for 4 million, but it would kind of come out in the wash a little bit if you're looking at all-comer buyers who are reliant on SBA financing, right? Because they're not going to be able to get as much financing support. So they want to have a broader cash flow margin, and then that reduces your potential buyers. So that reduces the demand, and then therefore would kind of reduce the price it probably goes for.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. Cash flow lenders are going to look at that, and it could be problematic. I'll give another example. If I have a practice in California right now, it's a great firm on the surface. It's about 3 million in revenue. They've got about 1.3 they're dropping to the bottom line. Ooh, this is a great firm. Problem is, you have 4 partners that are all in the trenches killing themselves to do the work. So now we have to replace 4 people that want to retire. And that can be done, but that's not an easy task. And you've got a tremendous amount of people that are expressing interest in this firm because it's profitable and it's in a good location and all these other factors. But then when you boil down to how are we going to actually make this transition work with 4 high-level people that service very technical type clients, partly why they're profitable, because you need a very high level of expertise and skill set to be able to do that work. This thing has been sitting on the market for a couple of months now, longer than one would have anticipated, because of some of the challenges in being able to actually deliver. And the sellers are saying, well, you got to be able to replace me. How are you going to be able to do that? And that's a question that most firms can't answer. Replacing one person, that's great. Replacing 2, 3, 4, when you start to get into that couple $1 million in revenue or larger range, again, I usually max out at about 5 million. So, top 100, top 250 firms, that's not my space. But in a 1 to 4 partner firm, which is typically what I'm dealing with, this is something you have to factor in.
I see that a good deal too with retirement age folks who are hanging on because they have so much expertise. They want, like we talk about all the time, they want to preserve their legacy and make sure their clients are taken care of. And they can't find, it's not like they're just willing to sell to somebody. They really need the seller or the buyer to sell them on how they're going to take care of their employees and how they're going to take care of their clients. And it can be pretty hard to convince somebody who's got, 40 years. Well, I mean, you have 30 years, right? So 70 years of experience in sophisticated, it can be hard to convince them that you're going to be able to come in no matter who you are and do as good of a job as them. So, buyers, that's a pain point that I see a lot right now because it's kind of a lot of these listings have hit the market in the accounting practice world because it's, late May. And that's a lot of buyers are reaching out to me. I'm sure they are to you, Todd, and saying, hey, do you know of any good listings? I'm looking to buy. I would love your take on some of the things people can do to be appealing in that from that angle. I think I'm on Search Funder. I'm on all these kind of community groups where I don't think the potential buyers or the searchers are realizing that they need to be salespeople themselves when they're, entering into this sphere, and they're not necessarily focusing on what they're bringing to the table as a potential buyer. And they're not making smart, calculated choices when they reach out to brokers, bankers, lawyers. What are some things that a buyer does that just makes you write them off, Todd?
It starts really with the sellers. And what I mean by that is that everyone that is looking to find a successor has different priorities in what they're looking for from a buyer. For example, and this is the majority of the sellers, they want somebody who's going to take good care of their clients and their staff. That's like priority number one. The economics, that's certainly an important factor, but finding somebody that they can rest their head on the pillow at night, knowing that they left their clients and their staff in a good spot. That is the most important thing to these accounting firms and to the sellers. There are some that it's show me the money. I want the best possible price. I want the best possible terms. Yeah, they care. It's not that they don't care, but it's not on the top of their priority list. So those priorities will be slightly different from firm to firm. As a buyer, depending on what your background is. So to answer your question, I'm finding now in 2024 that I can lump my buyers into really two categories. One of them is financial. Like these are the PE firms. These are the folks with deep pockets that want to get into, if maybe they're already in and have a platform and they're looking to build it out, or maybe they're trying to get in. And this is about half of my buyers that have never run an accounting firm. They do not know a debit from a credit. In that they are looking to invest in an accounting practice. That's great. And I think it's an awesome model for a multitude of reasons. And it's why so many of them are coming into our space. Those are the financial buyers. Then there are the strategic buyers, which are the existing accountants or accounting firms that look at this and say, okay, well, we can consolidate our firms together, have a better client experience. We bring in some talent. This would be a great fit. Economies of scale. So finding what is the right opportunity for a particular seller, I can't give advice to a buyer unless I knew what firm they're looking at, because they might not even be able to get their foot in the door if it's a firm that would only prefer to sell to an existing CPA or CPA firm. And that's a lot of them. So if you're an investor or somebody with a business background that wants to get into the space, you're going to have a hard time even getting your foot in the door, because there's not really an interest on the other side to talk with you, whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you have a good business plan or not. Alternatively, there might be some firms out there as a seller that are thinking, okay, I want to sell only to an existing firm that's got a large infrastructure. Or, you know what, I'm just a one-person firm or two-person firm where somebody coming out of industry, big four or private, as long as they can go get a good SBA loan, or they've got the ability to put in a solid down payment, whether that's through third-party financing, through one of our preferred partners, or their own personal resources, then they might be in a good spot. I would just say that anybody should have a one-page buyer summary, so that if you're talking with a broker like me, you have something outside of just a LinkedIn profile or a website that talks about what your objectives are, talks about your vision, so that we can at least get you in a Zoom meeting with a potential seller as a first step to give you an opportunity to shine. So without a summary, you've got 9 or 10 buyers out there for every practice that's for sale. And that's me being kind. There's probably more like 15 or 20. It's like a feeding frenzy. Mm-hmm. So if we have something that we can share that paints you in a positive light, you're not for everybody and everybody's not for you, but there will be firms and opportunities out there that could potentially be a good fit for you.
I think that you're highlighting, maybe generously. So you have two different groups that you put in. You have financial and you have strategic, but search funders are really common, which are, I guess, in the financial category there, but they're, regular entrepreneurs who are hanging out and looking for a business to buy. And, maybe they're self-funded, so they have some savings that they are living off of while they do this, or they're working while they're doing it. But, sometimes they've raised a bunch of capital and they're sitting there searching for a firm, but usually they don't have any accounting experience. Sometimes they do, and almost immediately they realize, like, I should focus on buying an accounting practice. This is a great opportunity for me, which I think is genius. But they don't always have anything in the background. And I have just had so many tone deaf reach outs now from folks who say, I'm looking to buy an accounting practice. Like, send me any ones that you might have. Or I had a straight up call with somebody who ended it saying, could you perform a bunch of cold calls for me and deliver me 3 potential firms that you think would be a good fit for my requirements? And that's not what I do at all. I'm a lawyer. And also that's not what a broker does. I don't know anyone who serves that function. And it's a total misread of the market where there's 15 to 20 buyers for every seller and like interested buyers for every seller. So, this tone deaf type of reaching out can be somewhat alleviated by just the thought exercise of what are these sellers actually interested in? I mean, beyond the top line purchase price that you're offering, they care about their employees, their clients, their reputation. And the biggest concern that most of them have is how are you going to take care of my clients if you don't have this experience? So if your summary isn't solving that issue or connecting those dots for them, I think you're going to really have a hard time getting across the threshold of even getting a Zoom meeting.
There are some sellers that, and I have an example right now, a two-partner firm, they don't want to retire. They have gotten the business to the point that they have built a beautiful organization. They make a good living, but to get it to the next level, they feel like they need to take on an investment and they need to bring on some leadership. And maybe that's not the CPA's strong suit, is developing. It's hard to take a firm from, let's just say, 4 million to 20 million, or from 20 million to 150 million. And sometimes it makes sense to bring on an investment with some capital and some people that have a CEO mindset that can really help take the business to the next level. So you're starting to see deals now where if a seller wants to stay on, maybe they roll some equity into the deal in addition to taking a substantial cash up front and maybe some level of a seller note. So there's opportunities like that. I think it's harder for a financial buyer to come in and replace a retiring or somebody who's has to jump ship within the next 12 months, whether it's for a health problem, retirement, other business interests. Those are the ones that are going to look you in the eye in an initial meeting and say, how are you going to replace me? I understand you're willing to pay my price, but who's going to champion this effort on day one or in 60 days or in 90 days? And the answer of, oh, well, we'll figure that out or we'll hire that person, that doesn't really make firms confident and comfortable, unfortunately.
That's true. I mean, the we'll figure it out, we'll hire something really falls flat for a lot of people in the industry, in any industry maybe right now, because if you've tried to hire anyone recently, is really challenging. So I think a lot of the people who do sell have gone through the process of trying to hire people to replace them. It hasn't succeeded. So unless you have somebody on staff or somebody you can point to that you've already designated who's going to be able to be your tax manager or what have you, I think the people I've talked to are pretty dubious when that's the plan.
Yeah, I'd say come to the broker or come to the attorney with what that plan is and who that person is. It's not to say that they can't figure it out, and many of them will and would and probably will get a chance to do that. But the reality is if you're up against 10 or 15 quality buyers and you don't have that plan or you don't have that person, you're going to get lost in the shuffle, unfortunately, because somebody right behind you has that person identified, and it's a sure thing versus the hope or promise that we'll find them together.
So in your experience with all the deals that you've worked on, who's the impediment here? The seller or the buyers?
I don't know that I would say that either are an impediment. I just think it's about fit. And every one of them is unique. Every seller has certain checklist of things that are on their wish list or dream list and priority list, and every buyer. So, you're not for everybody. Everybody's not for you. Somebody might be the perfect buyer for one firm and, they're not for the other. So I would just say, know what you're looking at. As a buyer, you've got to look at the initial SIM offering memorandum and be able to say, okay, this is how I would be able to execute, almost like a mini business plan of how this would work and what this would look like, because they're going to get grilled by somebody like me or by the seller in an initial meeting on how are you, before we even get into terms, like how would this work? How is this going to happen? So I just think it's finding the right match. It is a bit of a matchmaking process. I sometimes view myself in that light, in that, yes, I'm an intermediary. Yes, I'm here to negotiate price and terms, but there's so many things: personality, culture, level of service that all need to really fall in line. So a lot of stars need to line up for it to be the right deal for both parties.
There's a lot of people out there that are looking for accounting firms right now that are feeling like things are pretty bleak. Maybe they don't have an accounting background and they're just getting beat up by sellers, or they do have an accounting background and they're just not finding the right firm. And I mean, I love that we're coming into like an optimistic tone here, because I think that from what I've seen, it's the people that are stressed, the people that feel like it can't be done, that are ready to give up. It's because they've spent too much time on the wrong deal. If somebody wants you to move across the country, go look at another firm. Like just move on. Like if you're not moving and they want you to move, just go talk to somebody else. Like just don't beat your head against the wall. If they want you to be a CPA, go talk to somebody else. It's not worth the wear and tear.
Yeah, I think it's the timeline that has been getting people. There just hasn't, because of tax season, there hasn't been much on the market. So people have been really trying to make bad fits fit, because that's the only thing they see. So hopefully in a couple of months, people feel a little bit more optimistic when there's more going on. But I like that you were into the optimistic tone, Daniel, because I was going to take a turn and be like downer. So
typical
which
attorney.
I'm such a downer. But Todd, you said a lot of things that there's like I always say, there's a lid for every pot, and I think that's beautiful and certainly a good party line. But there has to be like a profile of a buyer that just is not a good fit for anyone. Like just they're all red flags. There are no solutions. So what makes somebody just a bad buyer?
It's just not being educated on what they're looking to get themselves into. So for example, if I have somebody that says, yeah, I want to buy a practice and don't put any money down and I want to buy that based on collections over 5 years. And I'll say, you've got no chance, whether it's through me or anybody else for that matter. Firms are just not selling that way, and they try to justify the valuation. So whether it's Thrive or any of the other great brokers in the industry, know what the market is and be ready to play with fair market value. Nobody's going to try to generate a sale for a business that it's not worth the price. So I think that's the first thing. And then also, I think you've got to be able to explain your vision. I mean, yes, there is like a sales aspect to being likable and having the seller feel that this is going to be a good match for their clients and their staff. Like you've got to be able to step into that seller's shoes if you're going to be an owner operator. So unfortunately, people that maybe have great technical skills, but they're just not, they have to ask themselves, like, are they good business people? Are they leaders? Can they think about their business like a CEO as instead of maybe buying yourself a job, which I think some people do try, and ultimately that becomes problematic and prohibits the deal from going through. So, I've seen a lot of buyers that will say the wrong thing, and we could probably do another 2-hour podcast on what not to say in an initial seller meeting. But as long as you remain kind of true to yourself and, business wise, you're doing the right things. You're going into this with an informed, educated, talking to people like Thrive or Sara or getting a pre-qual from a banker, just being prepared so that when you do take those meetings, you're in a spot to shine.
I really love how you gave us those 4 key elements you look at when valuing a firm. And I also feel like you touched on something where, if you want to be a buyer of a firm, regardless of your background, you need to have a good buyer profile, a good one-pager. What are some really great things, or what are the essentials that need to be in that profile, in that one-pager, to make it viable, to that you would want to present to a seller? What has to be there?
Yeah, I think it's half mini resume, where you were, what you've done, and then have like a vision statement. This is my mission statement. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. I'd like to have 20 million in revenue within the next X amount of years, looking for firms like this, location agnostic, or Southern California, whatever you're looking for. It doesn't need to be more than 1 page, maybe 2. I see these every day, and usually it's some level of a resume / vision statement of what they're looking to accomplish.
Is there anything that they should absolutely not put into this?
I don't know that I would would say that there's nothing that they shouldn't put in. I'd say just remain true to yourself and what you're trying to do, and where you've been and where you're headed. And look, again, I've said this a couple times. It's not a fit. Like, you're not for everyone. Everyone's not for you. So if this one isn't a fit, maybe the next one will be.
You can see why I like working with Todd, because he's like, it's important to get a really good match and very ethically, minded. There's buyer and seller. Don't mislead anyone about what you're actually looking for, because, there's probably a good fit where they'd be into that. So I think that's a really nice ethos to see in a broker. But I have things I think you should leave out.
Well, I was about to say, I think Todd's changing some of the advice that we've given on this very podcast. There's been plenty of episodes where we have said, do not talk about offshoring in your initial seller meetings. And Todd, I like your perspective better, that, be true to yourself. If that's your game plan, then maybe it does make sense just to tell them about it.
I don't think that's a dirty word anymore. It's not taboo like it was 10 years ago. I mean, if you're going to acquire scale, and in my experience, the big firms have been doing offshoring or outsourcing for years. But I could see where maybe that would rub somebody the wrong way if they don't do that or have strong feelings against that. But if ultimately that's your plan anyway, then you're setting yourself up for failure if you're not going to be transparent about that, and then you're going to go do it anyway, and that might not go over well. So I don't know. I mean, that's my personal feelings on outsourcing, but I'm sure there are other Sara do not do's. So I'd love to hear what some of those are.
Well, no, you're coming from the perspective of having, sellers that have a lot of interest in buyers. So when you're a buyer,
let's also not forget that brokers, we want the deal to get done. Attorneys, they get paid regardless.
Yeah. That's I wish that were true. Perhaps you should do my collections, Daniel. No, I mean, from a buyer's perspective, you just don't know what's going to rub them the wrong way. So I think it's nice when you see ones that are tailored to the target. Like, oh, I'm looking for a Southern California firm that's owned by, like the example you gave, like 4 partners. And, that can be really like, okay, they took the time to look at this and make this unique and, bespoke. And then the vision statement, you have to be really careful not to insult anyone, because if you're going to tell somebody like you're going to change what they've been doing for their whole career, that can be perceived poorly.
You're all right in that I have this lens because I work with the seller. They pay my fee. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the seller. So my mindset is let's see buyers in all their good, bad, and the ugly. And if they're not the right fit, next, let's talk to the next firm, right? So it's like I'm churning through buyers all day long to try to find that right fit. So that's why I do see myself more of like a matchmaker than trying to like help a buyer buy something that I don't think in the long term is going to be great for my client.
There's so many things here that we've touched on. Like we really could do a 2-hour podcast, I think, on this, because there's so many things I want to drill down into, but I'm also watching the clock. Todd, I want to make sure I give you plenty of time to talk to the audience, talk to the world. This is going to live on YouTube and on the podcast platforms. So who do you serve? Who do you want to help? How can they reach out to you? What can you offer them?
Thrive Financial Group, we specialize in working with accountants. That's the only industry that I deal with. I'm very much a specialist, and I've carved out that 500,000 to about 5 million in revenue range is the types of firms that are typically being represented by my organization. While I do work with sellers primarily, for me, finding somebody who's even considering what succession might look like, even if that doesn't mean listing their firm for a few years, I'm happy to have that conversation, because for anyone who's in practice, at some point you're going to need to cash in your chips, right? You're going to want to get the best possible price, terms, and fit. That process of planning to exit starts now. So what you think your exit might be in terms of how much time you're going to spend, what the terms might be, that might be a little different than what I'm seeing out there in the marketplace. So I'm happy to talk with anybody who's considering succession planning or just wants to be educated on that subject matter. On the other side, of course, we're looking for qualified buyers. I mean, I have listings currently on my site, and that's updated daily with anything new that comes on or something's going off because it's sold. So you're welcome to go to my site and bookmark that, check it periodically for any new listings that I receive, register as a qualified buyer, and I'll do my best to be your matchmaker. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Perfect. Just recently, like over the last couple of days, I've seen brokers in the IBBA Facebook group and in the Business Brokers of Florida looking for a broker, looking for someone who specializes in accounting firms. So you are in a great niche. I'm glad to have you here. Bonus content: over 30 years, have you been approached to sell other businesses? Have you sold other businesses, or do you stay strict on that niche?
I use this analogy that I try to go a mile deep and an inch wide versus a mile wide and an inch deep. So think about that for a second. So I don't want to be a generalist. I want to be the guy who knows everything and anything that I possibly can about my space. So I've been approached to sell other businesses. I don't want to do it. I like what I do. I have enough to keep me busy. I consider myself a boutique firm with me and a couple of people, and things are good. So why change?
Fantastic. So at the top of the call, we talked about what goes into valuing a firm. Toward the end of the call, we talked about how to position yourself as a buyer. So much value in between for buyers and sellers. Thank you so much, Todd. If you got value from this podcast, please like and subscribe to hear more from other deal makers in the industry. If you want to get in touch with Todd to list your firm or to buy a firm, his contact details will be in the show notes below. So as always, thanks for listening. And Todd, thanks for joining us. We'll have to have you back soon.
Daniel, Sarah, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you guys. I had a lot of fun and it's been great. So I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. It's been episode 14 of the Dealmakers podcast. Thanks.
Big, I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids' kids. That's wealth years and years. Promise my brother soon as he out to finish this bid, we finna do it big.